Hello, everybody. My name is Noah Herod, and I am here to show you true horrors of the original creepypastas that I used to read and listen to when I was younger. So I'm starting a new series where I just read really good creepypastas for the time being. The first creepypasta I will read to you is a little classic called The Peering Head. After moving into that house, my life changed for the worse. I've gained haunting memories and phobias, horrifying images stuck in my head that I'll never be able to shed. I was 23 at the time, and I just had gotten my first job, but it was out of state. I had to move away from my family. It was a stressful time in my life. I felt mixed emotions about living in a house all by myself, so far away from my family in New Jersey. Mostly a mix of excitement and nervousness. Of course, I didn't have much money at such a young age, so the house I was moving into was kind of old and run down. It was a fixer-upper, to put it lightly, but it did come with a good amount of furniture. I remember the night I arrived at the house after a long drive. It was probably close to 10 p.m., lugging that giant duffel bag of clothes up to an empty house, dropping the bag onto the porch, pushing the key into the keyhole and turning it, unlocking more than just the door, but a whole new chapter to my life. The rest of my life of independence. Of course, at that time, I didn't know what I was really walking into. On that first night, I tried to familiarize myself with the house a little bit. There was a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, a basement, 2 bedrooms upstairs, and 2 bathrooms. One upstairs and one in the basement. I had the basic necessities, furniture-wise, a fridge, an oven, and a microwave, a couch, a bed and such. All the floors were wooden and a bit creaky. It was more than an ideal place for an old woman, but the price was right. I was so exhausted that I just brushed my teeth and went to sleep on that old bed in the bedroom, not caring how dirty it might have been. The first night, I laid awake for probably about an hour, with the silence constantly being broken by cracks of wood and other house weathering sounds. All was fine the next morning. I ate at the nearest IHOP, got some groceries, and headed back home. Getting out of my car, I saw a woman getting into her car. She noticed me. I gave her a wave and slowed down, half expecting her to come over and introduce herself. But all she did was return a wave before getting into her car and driving off. Now, I was used to having unfriendly neighbors, but there was something off about the way that she looked at me that made me feel uncomfortable. I detected a hint of worry in her face. I shrugged it off and went inside. I spent a better part of the night watching TV on the old rabbit-eared television that was left in the house. When I decided to call it a night, I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. Due to a force of habit, I still shut the door while in the bathroom, but while I was brushing my teeth, I heard the faint sound of a single knock on my bathroom door. I felt my heart drop, and I jumped back against the wall in response. The sound caught me off guard. It wasn't the sound of wood settling or anything like that. I distinctly heard the sound of a fist hitting the door. I am living on my own now. I'm a grown man, so now I have to be a man. I turned the knob and pushed the door open with force, lunging out into the black hallway, expecting to run into somebody. But there was nothing at all. I flipped the light switch to the hallway on. All the doors were shut, just as they were before, except for the door to my bedroom. I took a deep breath and ran straight into the room, literally flailing my arms everywhere, expecting to hit somebody. I stopped and took a good look around the room. I was the only living soul in the room. So, that was it. There was no other possible place an intruder could have gone. I would have definitely heard them running down the creaky old steps, and I would have heard any of the doors close. It was at this point where it was just my imagination or more house noises, maybe a mix of the both. I had trouble falling asleep that night. I jumped at every little noise, paranoid of my surroundings. I was acting like a terrified little kid. After flipping over and trying to get comfortable for the 100th time, I noticed the door to my bedroom was open. From what I remembered, I had not left it open. Then I realized there was something poking in at the edge of the door. I sat up and tried to adjust my eyes to see what the hell that thing was. My eyes adjusted to the dark ever so slightly, but it was enough to make out the object to be a face of a woman, and she was undoubtedly staring at me, laying in my bed. I curled up in fear, screaming like a 5-year-old. The head moved from the doorway and out of sight. I threw my hand over to the desk, shoving things to the floor as I desperately tried to find my phone. Feeling of plastic case never felt so good as I dialed 911. I stayed curled up like a baby until the police arrived. I rushed down to the stairs to the front of my door and let them in. I explained to the officers that something or someone was in my house. One of the officers questioned me, asking how I knew what they looked like and where I saw them. I explained that I saw a woman poking her head into my bedroom, just staring at me. I told them it was too dark to make out any of discernible features. The two officers had rushed me inside to look for an intruder as I sat on the curb, waiting with the other officer that came in on the second patrol car. After about 20 minutes, the officers came out and told me that they searched every single room and closet, but there was no sign of anybody. The officers proceeded to ask me some questions, eventually asking me if I live alone, to which I responded that I just moved away from all my family in New Jersey. The officers looked at each other and one stepped forward and claimed that he knew what was going on. The officer said that he's seen this happen many times before. When a young man or woman moves far away from their family, they often get homesick and start to think they're seeing things, commonly images of people. It didn't seem impossible. I had no other explanation. The officer assured me that no one was in my home, and I just needed some time to get used to living alone. I thanked the officers as they drove off into the night, leaving me to go back into my house. The next day, I had my job orientation around noon. I met a few people who I thought were pretty cool. All of them were out of state, just like me, except one guy named Jerry. I found that Jerry actually lived a few blocks away from me. I was happy to know that I would be working with people I would get along with, as making friends here was my number one priority. That night, I threw a TV dinner in the microwave and headed up to my room to watch some movies. I called it a night, shortly after I realized nothing was on TV. I didn't have anything else to do. I went to my bathroom and brushed my teeth again with the door shut out of force of habit. I'd completely forgotten what happened that previous night, up until I heard something come from outside the bathroom down the hall. That's when everything came back to memory. No, I'm just imagining things, I told myself. There's nobody in this house. But my positive attitude was shattered when I heard the same exact sound a second time. This time, I could make it out the sound to be a fist pounding on the wall in the hallway. No, it wasn't supposed to be real. It can't be real. With one giant boost of confidence, I decided I had to end, whatever this was. I swung the door open and stopped in my tracks before getting 2 feet away from the door. Down in the hallway, by the open door of the extra bedroom, there was a head poking down the hall right at me. The lights in the hallway were off. I couldn't make out any facial features. I couldn't even see her eyes. I let out a gasp as the body once again filled with fear. If this was real, I had to confront this woman, so I stomped down the hall trying to seem as intimidating as possible. But as I got in a couple feet of the door, the woman slowly moved her head away from the doorway and out of sight. As soon as I walked through the doorway, I flipped on the night switch and scanned the room. Besides only 2 pieces of furniture, the king-size bed and the antique dresser, the room was empty. I got on my hands and knees and looked under the huge bed. Nothing. Then I saw the closet in the corner of the room. This had to be it. She had to be hiding in there. With one swift motion, I turned the knob and swung the door open. Nothing. Except for a bunch of hanging ties, old jackets, and a pair of boots on the ground further back in the closet. Inside the closet, the smelled disgusting, so I immediately shut the door and let it be. I was left in the empty room scratching my head. Nobody was in here. The officer was right. I had been so homesick that my mind was creating phony images of a person. As I was walking out of the room, I felt a sharp pain in my right foot. I lifted up my leg to see what I had stepped on. It was glass. Upon closer inspection, I saw tiny shards of glass scattered across the floor. Whoever was in charge of cleaning this house did a bad job. But it wasn't that big of a deal. I made a note to self to sweep up a little glass and get some air fresheners. Because as I came to think about it, the whole house smelled a little funky. And I'm sure that wasn't doing my mind any good considering what was going on. It was another sleepless night. But thankfully I had nothing going on the next day. Come morning, I did do some grocery shopping, but when I got home I realized I had forgotten the air fresheners. I didn't feel like driving back to the store, so I decided I could deal with the house odor for a little while longer. I did a lot of work around the house that day. I put in some new furniture in, swept up the broken glass, and I got a good amount of cleaning done. Mainly dusting off old furniture so it didn't feel like I was living in a dead person's house. I went on a bike ride later in the day in the woodsy area of the neighborhood, and when I got back, I cooked myself some dinner for the first time, and I called it a night. When I came to brush my teeth, I was almost dreading having to go back in that bathroom after the previous nights, but I brushed my teeth without any interruptions. I breathed a sigh of relief when I was done, and I continued back into my rickety old bed in my bedroom. Maybe I was finally getting over my delusions. I did my nightly movie watching before I turned off the TV, to be alone in my thoughts. I was eager to start work, just end the constant loneliness. I needed something to take my mind off the weird things I had seen. About half an hour later, I finally drifted away to sleep, only to be woken up by a loud bang. I sat up while rubbing my head, confused, and that's when I saw it. At the edge of my bed was the woman I had seen before, peering over the bed so that I only saw her head was visible once again. I let out a high-pitched shriek, completely horrified by this disturbing sight. It's not real. It's not really there, I told myself. But it wouldn't go away. It just stayed at the edge of my bed, watching me. I looked to my right, at the lamp, sitting to my nightstand and looking right at my bed. I didn't want to feed my mind tricks and games, but I had to see what this thing looked like. I reached my hand out to the knob of the lamp and clicked it onto the right. The bright light of the lamp illuminated my room along with the face at the end of my bed, and what I saw has been engraven in my mind. This was no ordinary woman. The few hairs were still attached to her scalp, were long, gray, and tangled. Her skin was cracked, her mouth hung open, revealing stained brown teeth in her eyes. There, there weren't any. There were just two gaping black holes in her face. I screamed louder than I knew I could, and I flung my pillow across the bed to the thing, and just like that, the thing was gone. My heart was probably beating 300 times a minute, and yet I was frozen in a curled up position in my bed. What I had just seen. I only got to about 2 hours of sleep that night. Things seemed to be getting worse. Why would my mind create an image like that? I had no idea what to think anymore, so I called my mom and informed her of what had been happening. I didn't want to admit that I was hallucinating in fear that my mom was thinking I was sick, and the last thing I wanted to do was worry my mother. But I had no one else to talk to about it, so I explained everything, and I expected. She started to freak out and panic, assuming someone was actually in my house, and then I told her about the awful, decaying features of the woman's head. I immediately detected that her tone had changed from worried to confused and concerned. She told me to get as much sleep as possible and to take my vitamins every single day. A typical mom answer, but I can't say I expected much help from her. After hanging up the phone, I realized that she too thought I was going crazy, but it was too real. I couldn't just be imagining it. I decided to get out of the house to get my mind off of it. I went on another long bike ride, and when I got back, I went to the store again, specifically to buy the air fresheners. The fresh smell would definitely do my mind some good. Before getting in the line to check out, I ran into Jerry from orientation. We had a quick little chat. I talked about my daily activities in the neighborhood, biking, shooting hoops at the park, and a lot of movies. He asked where I went biking, and as he knew of some great biking trails in the area, I told him I went biking over by the woodsy side of the neighborhood as it's only a few blocks away from my street. What street is that? He asked me, to which I replied, Maple Drive. A look of worry suddenly spread across his face as he seemed to be instantly consumed into typing his phone away. What's wrong? I asked him. He lifted the screen up to my phone's face. Is this where you live? He asked. There was a picture on my screen of my house. What? How did you know? Why is that picture online? Jerry went on to explain that before me there was a couple living there. The neighbors claimed that they always heard the couple fighting and the sounds of glass breaking. Then he dropped a bomb. He told me later that day that the scream of the wife could be heard by all surrounding neighbors, and shortly after, one of the neighbors found the woman's body with her head missing. This story was such horrifying news to me. I had no idea about the house's past history. I left the store shaking in my feet, feeling like my legs were getting weaker as I walked to the car. I got lunch at Wendy's and took a detour back home, trying to think everything out. Things were starting to make sense. The low price, the old furniture, the broken glass, but one thing wasn't accounted for. The smell, the horrible odor from the house, especially from the closet. What if something's in that closet? I had to get home and find out what was in that closet. After getting home, I immediately ran to the extra bedroom with the closet. I swung open the door only to have a blast of foul air hit me right in the face. The smell seemed even more unbearable than before. I ravaged through the closet, throwing all hanging ties and jackets out onto the king-size bed. There was nothing at all. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing else in here besides the ties and jackets. It was just a regular closet. I felt a headache coming on. It didn't make any sense. I plugged the air freshener into the outlet in the closet and shut the door, not even bothering to hang the ties and jackets back up. I didn't understand where the odor was coming from, but it didn't matter anymore. The air freshener would take care of it. I walked out of the bedroom, but with the feeling of having missed something. I didn't really know what, but I felt like my brain was trying to tell me something. I didn't dwell on it though. I was more focused on calling my mom and telling her about the history of the house. We were not warned or informed of this history, and I intended on making a case of it. I tried calling my mom 3 times, and a third on the ring she finally picked up. She informed me that she was just getting home from a long and stressful drive during a snowstorm. I completely forgot it was cold in New Jersey. She told me to hang on and that she was taking her boots off and then hit me. Boots. The boots. My heart dropped. There were jackets and ties, but no boots. Where the hell was the boots I saw in the closet 2 days ago? I turned to the bedroom door, and there it was, the head of the woman peering down at the hall at me. This time, I couldn't even get a scream out. The head began to move further down the hall until a tall body emerged in sight. There was someone in a raggy, rich clothing, covered in bloodstains, and they were wearing the woman's face. The huge figure charged down the hall towards me, but I was already halfway down the stairs. The sound of the boots stomping on the stairs was right behind me as I was trying to unlock and open. I felt 2 hands grab me and shove me to the floor. As I lay defenseless in the corner, held down by the towering figure, with only my legs free, I only had one option. I kicked the figure in the groin, and he collapsed down, groaning in pain. I thanked my lucky stars, and I pushed him off of me. Freeing myself, I opened the front door and I ran to my car, driving about 5 blocks away before calling the police. Unfortunately, the man was already gone when the police arrived. I had a pretty good idea of who the man was and gave a tip to the police. Of course, they already had a good idea as well and didn't really do them any good. I still don't understand how I mistook it for hallucinations, and I'm still trying to figure out where he managed to hide after each appearance. I think when he was at the edge of my bed, he simply just hid under my bed for the rest of the night. And it only terrifies me to think of what he would have done if I simply just looked under. I don't know why he toyed with me though. Why didn't this sick freak just kill me if that was his main goal? Or maybe it wasn't. Hopefully I'll never know. It's scary to think of that man is still out there. I moved back in with my family after that, and I refused to move back out of state. My dad helped me to get my foot back in the door for the company he works for, so I think I'm alright employment wise. But I still think of this experience every night, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I can swear that I see the woman's head peering over to me in my bed.